Welcome to Bartolomeo Meo Mugiwara fans. I've been looking for the right moment to bring an analysis of Enel's cover story for a long time, and after the last video, with the appearance of God Nika, it seems that this is that moment. But we're going to analyze why more than just what Enel finds on the moon though. Basically, what happens in that cover story is that Enel reaches the moon with the Armaxim and first meets some small robots that have been defeated by a group that is performing archaeological excavations who are introduced as spice pilots. Enel earns them an access to the excavations, where he finds the remains of a city with some paintings that seem to tell the story of the people that lived there once. They built an army of robots identical to those found by Enel, and the story tells that people had to leave to the blue planet due to lack of natural resources. The name of that city on the moon was Birka. Here, we are having the foundations to understand the past of the One Piece world, because we can immediately see that there are three representatives of the people of the moon, with white wings and who differ in their attire. And it turns out that we already know of three different places with people with white wings which wear different outfits that match the ones in the painting. At least, the Skypians and the Shandians seem clear. If the third ones are the ones of the third place that we know, then they would be Birkans, of whom we already met a few of them and, well, it is the same name as the ancient city on the moon. This happened more than 1,000 years ago, and they were already very technologically advanced since in the painting we can see two technological milestones, the robots and the balloons. Yes, this is One Piece, so balloons can be in the top of technology, why not? The balloons are very important, since they allow them to travel from the moon to the blue planet, as we see, and vice versa, since the robots Enel met at the beginning arrive like this. We have also seen how the balloons allow them to create artificial sky islands, so they play a key role. But there are more things in the paintings than the ones catching the eye. We have the sun clearly represented in one of them, and in the other. If that yellow glow were also the sun, it would mean that the power with which the robots work would be solar. We already know that they work with electricity though, since Enel activates them through lightnings, but since there is no atmosphere to be able to have natural thunderbolts, it seems acceptable to think that the electricity was generated using the sun as an energy source. This would also explain the veneration for the sun with that figure of sun god Nika, and could even explain what was that lack of natural resources, since the moon looks currently like ours, barren and permanently dark. We can also see some animals in the paintings. There is a sea king next to a crustacean, and in the platform under the feet of those who are living what appear to be snakes can be seen. It's not clear to me what this platform is, since the feet do not touch it, and apart from the snakes there is blue above and below, which could represent the sky and the sea, so it could be their destination. But if these people brought snakes with them, it can also make sense, since we have already seen a type of snake that grows massively that the Shandians venerate as a god, so those snakes could have their origin on the moon as well. As could also be the sea kings. They are huge fish and, as I pointed multiple times, intelligent. They are aware of what is happening in the world, what has happened, and even what will happen. Besides, since they are part of an ancient weapon, it would make sense that they had an extraterrestrial origin. If not, why show us this giant beast on the moon and give it the same color pattern? Something to think about. Well, I'm already talking as if we all understood that this alien invasion in which the moon people go to live on the blue planet was related to that great ancient kingdom that the world government erased. And yes, all seems to point to they came down to live on the blue planet and created a kingdom that soon stood out by their most advanced technology. The history of the city of the Shandian and Shandora indicates this. 1,100 years ago, the city was at the peak of its prosperity, and it fell 800 years ago, during the Void Century. And if this coincidence in the days wouldn't be enough, we also have that the city had the same pre-Columbian architecture as that found on the moon, and, by the way, in So, and the writing is the one used in the poneglyphs. Then, is this meaning that the ancient kingdom was Shandora? Well, it's clear that at least it belonged to it. However, the only image we have of that kingdom does not match, and from what we have seen, it seems its area of influence was mainly in the New World. So it seems to me that there were more islands and cities. The Great Kingdom should be great, right? it would make sense that just as the Shandians had their city, the Skypians and Virkans had it too. We know where the Skypians currently are. 400 years ago, they already lived on a sky island just above Shandora. However, we know nearly nothing about Birka. We are told that Enel, who was from there, destroyed it. But if the name of the City of the Moon was also Birka, shouldn't the one that inherits its name be the most important one? There we could have an answer. Because we need to place some territory of the Great Kingdom near Wano, a human kingdom that learned the language and transmitted it through generations, and that is the area where Loftel is also supposed to be. In fact, the Sky Island from which Kaido jumped is introduced as Balloon Terminal, a city in ruins on an artificial Sky Island. Its name points to this was the place the Moon people built to travel between the planet and the satellite, and we could see, based on where Kaido fell, that it is in the New World. But even though this Birka where Enel and his priests and some other characters that we met are from was a Sky Island, it could simply be the place the survivors of the Void Century took refuge after the fall of the Great Kingdom. Clover is killed just before he gets to say the name of the kingdom, and that seems to point to the name would give us too much information. A name that we already know would fit here. We were told that Birka was southeast of Skypiea, so it seems the survivors of the three types of people of the Moon gathered around the same area, far from the New World. Even though it is not confirmed, I'm pretty sure Orochi is from Birka, mainly because of the size of his wings, but also because it is more convenient for the story. And that's despite the fact that Oda drew him like this as a child in a SBS, with the typical hairstyles of Skypians. He's the supernova we know the least about, and Oda seems to be saving it for near the end of the story. Apart from those we met in Skypiea, the other confirmed character from Birka is Haradas. Besides knowing that he was born in Birka, we also know that he participated in the creation of Weatheria. So we can assume all the scientists who were there with Nami are probably from there as well. This also confirms that at least the Virkans are able to create Sky Islands. With this, we will have that the Strohas have already been adopting technology from the Great Kingdom with what Nami brought from Weatheria and Usopp's dials. And probably there is some more technology brought by another Stroha. We will see that shortly. So, after being defeated by the world government, the survivors of the Great Kingdom took refuge on Sky Islands like Birka and Skypiea that they could create thanks to that advanced technological item I mentioned before, the balloons. And apparently, they settled close to Shandora, so close that the city ended up traveling to them. There is a theory saying that if Shandora was in the right eye of the skull, there could be another city in the left eye that was also impacted by the knock-up stream, but the inhabitants of Skypiea did not have land until the Shandians arrived, and they valued it so much because it was unique. And the same seems to be for Birka, since Enel even built that ark to go for what he called the Endless Earth, that turned out to be the Moon. I think he knew that his ancestors were from there and that he was going to bring something. Why did he build such a ridiculously big ark just for himself? We've already got clues that the descendants of the people of the Moon have some kind of knowledge of their past. There is a part of Enel's cover story I still haven't talked about, the flashback of the robots that went to the Moon with the balloons. Despite being identical to the ancient ones in the Moon, they were created by this man on Karakuri Island. It's not only that he knew how to create them, but he was introduced to us as Professor Tsukimi, who likes to watch the moon. And Tsuki means moon in Japanese, and he dies because of the fright of seeing the explosion on the moon from the excavation of the Spice Pirates. This seems to point to he knew of his origins and had somehow inherited the technology they used. In Karakuri Island, where this professor was from, is located the so-called futurist kingdom of Baltimore, and we know it because Frankie spent his 2 years of the time skipping there. This is also the place where Dr. Vegapunk was born. Based on the information we have about this island, it shouldn't be far from the area of Jaya, Skypiea and Birka. On that island, Dr. Vegapunk began to develop inventions, starting by robots, but in the form of animals. He also worked on cyborgs and other projects, such as studying devil fruits. However, he left unfinished his first big project that it seems that was meant to provide free heating to the entire island. We'll see if this is not finally being used for any other purpose later in the story, but it seems to be enough hints to at least think that Vegapunk may be also a descendant from the people of the Moon, like Professor Tsukimi. If this is correct, and he also had information about his origins, it would give us a very different point of view about his role as head of the science department of the Navy, doesn't it? So, if we connect all those dots with the ones we already had, we get something like the people of the moon went to live down to the blue planet because of lack of natural resources, and they founded cities and kingdoms, and over time related to other races. It's clear they had a special bond with fishmen and minks. So special that it would make sense to think they also belong to the Great Kingdom. Being one of the ancient weapons, a princess of the Ryugu Kingdom, the bond is very tight. However, it seems that it was a different story with humans. With the exception of Wano country, we cannot see any other human country with which they had good relations. And yet we know that 20 human kingdoms allied themselves to end them. I've already pointed to the possibility that the Sea Kings were brought or created by the people of the moon, and this makes me wonder if I could go even further and propose an original world without intelligent animals, just like ours. This way, fishmen and minks were also brought or created by them somehow. Fishmen, unlike fish, are obsessed with the sun, and their main wish is living under it, and the moon makes the minks to transform. We got no clues as to the origin of the Ryugu Kingdom, but we do know that the Mokomo Dukedom of the Ming is around 1000 years old, so they might not have existed before the arrival of the aliens. By the way, Sunisha can also be included on this group of intelligent animals, and if we take into consideration that it is a giant elephant with 2 joints on each leg, and that's why it reaches the bottom of the sea, there is a chance to relate it with other races such as the giants, long arms, and long legs. That area where the survivors gathered, which, by the way, is close to Arabasta, the kingdom of that alliance against the Great Kingdom that seems to have switched sides in the end, refusing to go to Mary Joyce, and hiding an ancient weapon, there is another island that we know, Long Ring Long Land. The animals in there are unique, some with extremely long parts and others halfway to what we might call humanization. They seem like the missing link between animals and the races that we know, and here we could also include one that we haven't mentioned yet, long necks. And now we just mention a new race, the Lunarian, with wings similar to those that come from the moon, only that black instead of white, and a name that seems to indicate that they're also coming from the moon, so that would make another race coming from the satellite. Back to Sunisha. We also know that its height is 20 km, and Oda already explained its long legs in a SBS, where he also added that this is an elephant of type Naitami Norida. If we follow that name, we have one of those things that we all love from Oda. That name means nothing. That if it is read backwards in Japanese, we get Dari no e mitaina, which literally means like a drawing by Dali. So I've been searching among Dali's paintings and I found this one. The Temptation of St. Anthony, with long-legged animals with multiple joints, and the 5 that have something on their backs, which in some cases are buildings, they are all elephants. And if that were not enough, we can also see sky islands and a being with white wings. How can this be a coincidence? Sunisha's scene, for which it has been wandering the sea for 1000 years, can be anything, but it seems that the punishment was imposed by the Shogun of Wano, since it is his descendants who can give permissions to do things off-it, even if it is just to defend. What is clear is that it is used to give the Min a place to live that is difficult to trace. So it must have been the Great Kingdom, the one that built the city on Sou and designed it in order to deal with the water that the elephant is throwing periodically. As I mentioned at the beginning, the architecture of the buildings is the same than the one in Shandora and the moon. If we imagine a planet dominated by humans, to which suddenly a wave of immigrants from the moon comes that, having a much more advanced technology, end up dominating the world, with 3 powerful and unique weapons, among which is a ship capable of destroying an entire island, something that more than 1000 years later has not yet been accomplished, and besides, they bring with them a number of strange and powerful beings, I think we can be talking about a full-fledged alien invasion. But here, the plot twist is that this time it turns out that the invaded ones, the humans, are the bad ones. If we consider that humans would already have their wars, that they would despise other races, that, as I mentioned sometimes, they already practice slavery, as the Tontata explained, well, in the other hand, we would have that the Great Kingdom would bring peace. they would try to get along with everyone. It's not a coincidence that Oda has based the people of the moon on angels, with white wings and living in the clouds. And thanks to the figure of Nika, we also know that some warriors of this great kingdom fought to save the oppressed ones. This sets the scenario for the war of the Void Century, with the human kingdoms that not only have to see how strange races roam free around the world, but some warriors are sneaking in the kingdoms to free their slaves. They had centuries to find a way to overcome or nullify the ancient weapons, in order to have an option to defeat the alien Great Kingdom. And it happened. And the result is that morality that led them to fight is now exposed after the victory, with the Celestial Dragons collecting slaves and despising all non-human races. Clover, in his explanation about the Great Kingdom, he specifically mentioned their values, which would be a threat for the world government. In that scenario, with the human kingdoms looking for a way to overcome what they considered their rival, I think Devil Fruits must have been either a discovery or creation of humans, who were the ones that needed a power-up. The Great Kingdom was already far superior. There are fruits of such earthly things and unknown by the moon people like rubber, mochi, toys, candy, etc. Well, until here is where this extensive theory goes. I hope you like the conclusions drawn from the analysis of the data we have, and if so, we might meet in another video. See ya!